St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to pose a question, a follow-up to a question that I had asked in question period, and that is, what does the Prime Minister have to hide? What does the Prime Minister have to hide now that it has been revealed that the Prime Minister obstructed an RCMP criminal investigation into his wrongdoing during the SNC-Lavalin scandal? The Prime Minister's obstruction of a criminal investigation into himself is another chapter in the Prime Minister's sordid and corrupt conduct surrounding SNC-Lavalin. This is a Prime Minister who obstructed justice by politically interfering in the criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, which was facing a raft of bribery and corruption charges, by putting pressure on his then Attorney General to resolve the charges by way of a deferred prosecution agreement. In other words, the Prime Minister attacked the independence of his Attorney General. And when his then Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, stood up to him, spoke truth to power, and refused to acquiesce to the Prime Minister's corrupt demands, what did the Prime Minister do? He fired her and then threw her out of the Liberal caucus. That's what someone with integrity who stands up to this corrupt Prime Minister, that's what happens to them. They get thrown out, thrown under the bus. The Ethics Commissioner launched an investigation into the Prime Minister's scandalous conduct and found that the Prime Minister had breached ethics laws in relation to his political interference. This marked the second time that the Prime Minister had been found guilty of breaching ethics laws, the Prime Minister being the first Prime Minister in Canadian history to have been found guilty of breaking ethics laws. That's the record of this Prime Minister. The RCMP launched their own criminal investigation into the Prime Minister, which did not make progress. We now know why it didn't make progress, and that is because the Prime Minister obstructed the investigation by refusing to turn over documents requested by the RCMP, hiding behind cabinet confidence. Last Monday, the RCMP Commissioner was set to appear before the Ethics Committee to testify about the Prime Minister's obstruction. But before the RCMP Commissioner could utter a word, the Prime Minister ordered Liberal and NDP MPs to shut down committee to silence the RCMP Commissioner. The Prime Minister's brazen effort to silence the RCMP Commissioner demonstrates that this Prime Minister has something to hide. And it must be bad. It must be really, really bad. What incriminating evidence is contained in those cabinet documents that the Prime Minister refused to turn over to the RCMP? What is the Prime Minister afraid that the RCMP Commissioner would say about his obstruction that he wants to keep the lid on? So again, a simple question: what does the Prime Minister have to hide?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am happy to be able to rise to answer this question once again, because it's interesting to me, Madam Speaker, that the Conservatives are so desperate to cover up and to filibuster their spending scandal that they are trying to reinvent the past. Madam Speaker, with respect to calls for a criminal investigation by the RCMP have made it very clear on this matter. There is no criminal investigation. There are no criminal charges. There are no reports of obstruction, because the matter is closed and the RCMP made that independent decision. The Commissioner has even recently been equally clear that due process has been followed and he is satisfied with the result. So, Madam Speaker, it begs the question of why would the Conservatives bring up an issue that has been resolved, that the RCMP Commissioner has said himself that the matter is closed and there is no investigation? Why, Madam Speaker? I think it's because at committee, what the members opposite are refusing to tell Canadians is that they actually had 26 times that the Conservative members could have moved a motion to bring the RCMP Commissioner to committee. Instead, they waited to filibuster when the committee was interested in looking at the spending scandal of 5 Conservative members who went on a trip to the UK where, Madam Speaker, they dined on porterhouse steaks, Chateaubriand, Scottish smoked salmon, $1,800 worth of champagne in one sitting. At the Savoy restaurant, they spent $1,000 on a 3-course lunch, $1,200 at an oyster bar for dinner. They had 10 bottles of wine in one of these sittings, 3 of them, each bottle at $600 a piece, Madam Speaker. So what I find really interesting for Canadians to see is that the Conservatives are desperate to cover up the fact that they had lobbyists spending thousands of dollars to fly them to the UK to dine on Chateaubriand and sip on champagne, Madam Speaker. And they do not want Canadians to look at this. They do not want committee to ask questions of why lobbyists took them to the UK to spend tens of thousands of dollars for the Conservatives and their champagne taste. So, Madam Speaker, what we have here is we have Conservatives who don't accept the independent advice of the RCMP that have determined that with regards to the SNC matter, the matter is closed. There are no criminal charges, no investigations, no obstruction. But what we do see, Madam Speaker, is the true root cause of the Conservatives' filibuster is because they want to cover up their champagne-sipping taste.
The honourable for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, that is quite rich, given that this is a Prime Minister that racked up a hotel bill of $6,000 a night in London at taxpayers' expense. And talk about an insulting answer to a serious question. The reason there is no RCMP investigation and no criminal charges that have been laid is very simple, and that's because the Prime Minister obstructed that investigation by hiding behind cabinet confidence, blocking the RCMP from obtaining documents that they requested into his potential criminal wrongdoing. So again, if the Prime Minister has nothing to hide, then why did he refuse to turn over pertinent documents to the RCMP that in turn resulted in them not being able to make progress on their investigation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I trust the words of the RCMP Commissioner, who has determined and said independently that due process has been followed and he is satisfied with the result. There is no investigation, there is no criminal charges, and there is no obstruction. But the obstruction we should talk about here today, Madam Speaker, is the fact that the member from Cumberland Colchester received over $7,000 for the trip to the UK. The member for Northumberland Peterborough South, $8,300. The member for Battlefords Lloydminster, $7,900. The member for Lakeland, $7,700. And the member for New Brunswick Southwest, $13,548 paid for by lobbyists. Why won't the Conservatives let us talk about this at committee?